Hello everybody, my name is Adam Thorne and welcome to the Australian Aviation Podcast. For those that were listening, or in fact more to the point, for those people that were watching last week, you will remember that my co-host Jake Nelson, for reasons that at the time we were unaware of, appeared to be regenerating into a new form. Well, there's two things we've learned since that time. Firstly, unfortunately for me, Jake hasn't regenerated into Sydney Sweeney. He just seems to have regenerated back into the same Jake we know and sort of love. The second thing we've learned is I wondered why Jake started to, out of nowhere, just start regenerating. It clearly was some kind of ripple in the space-time continuum caused by an event I now believe is the collapse into administration of Rex. Jake, welcome to the show.
Possibly, Adam. Fortunately, I managed to undo that frankly disastrous regeneration in a complicated series of events involving a couple of Cybermen that were made from Time Lords and exploiting their regeneration energy, and something about all my past forms. It was a weird episode. I almost regenerated into David Tennant, but I talked myself out of it. So that's a plus. And yes, after months after Bonza, another beloved Australian company goes into voluntary administration. Adam, I fear for all the workers at Carl's Jr.
And again, I've never heard of Carl's Jr. in my life. So what is it? Is it what kind of food does Carl's Jr. do?
Burgers mainly. It's a burger place. They didn't have a whole bunch of stores in Australia. A few of them closed. I went to one in Melbourne last year. It was okay. I think the duopoly in Australian fast food, Adam, between McDonald's and Hungry Jack's,
Burger King,
between McDonald's and Hungry Jack's is it may be too strong for a new entrant to break. I mean, we've seen Carl's Jr. Attempt to come in and shake up what is a stranglehold that these two major businesses have on the Australian burger market, and they just couldn't do it.
Well, one of the big problems, of course, is that burger joints struggle to get units, and the units just aren't being freed up. And what's happening is you've got McDonald's and Hungry Jack's kind of squatting on their units, and no one else can get in. Exactly. And it's stifling competition.
And all these supply chain issues with sourcing patties and chips and things like that. It makes it hard for smaller players.
Yeah, and a lot of people say the traditionally smaller population of Australia stops competition, but we've seen in other countries of similar size there is a more variety of burger joints.
Exactly. And it's hopefully some of the regional operations of Carl's Jr. can survive.
Yes. Right. Before we carry on this nonsense, we have our usual time to talk about shout-outs. And we have a lot of shout-outs, or I have a lot of shout-outs to do, because as you may be aware, in almost exactly a month, on the 29th of August, Australian Aviation is having its first ever summit. So the gist is that we're going to have our awards as normal, our third annual awards, in the evening at the Star in Sydney, and it'll be one of those swanky do's, fancy meals, wear a tux, all that palaver. And then during the day, we're going to have, our first ever summit, and I can announce lots and lots and lots of speakers. So I can now formally announce that doing a keynote session in the morning will be the CEO of Western Sydney Airport, Simon Hickey, and he will be having a kind of fireside chat. So clearly, in the next 18 months, the biggest event in aviation, or the biggest disruption, is going to be the opening of Western Sydney Airport, which is going to be the first time we have two big airports in one capital city. So he'll be talking all about the project, how close it is to completion, talking about the Aerotropolis as well, how this is a kind of a new model for Australia. And you will be able to come along and kind of ask the questions directly to him. So thank you very much, Simon, for agreeing to come along. We've also can confirm that Boeing will be on stage alongside Virgin Australia talking about sustainability and how we build a more sustainable industry. Obviously, IATA, the kind of global aviation body, has set this 2050 target for the whole industry to kind of decarbonise. They're going to be talking about, how possible is this and how are we going to get there? So obviously we're going to be looking at a new generation of aircraft, then we're possibly going to be looking at SAF fuels, then a new generation of aircraft again, but they will be on stage talking kind of firsthand about how this is going to happen. And that will include Daniel Dott, who is the head of fuel and aviation decarbonisation at Virgin Australia. He is the man in charge. Alongside that, we can also announce today that we are going to have the interim CEO of Air Services, who will be presenting another keynote session as well. We are going to have aviation royalty, Captain Deborah Laurie. He's going to be talking about diversity in the industry. Obviously, Deborah Laurie was the first female airliner pilot in Australia after she went toe-to-toe with Reg Ansett in a year-long court case and won. We're going to have Jessie Suskin from Google Wing Drone Deliveries, who only, a week ago or 2 weeks ago, moved into the Melbourne eastern suburbs. They are doing hundreds of thousands of drone deliveries each year. Google Wing, previously called Logan, the drone delivery capital of the world. So in terms of future drone technology, we've got the top people. We've also got Sue Osborne. I'm ranting on now. I'm going to keep going. We've also got Sue Osborne, the head of flight operations at Nova Sky Stories. She herself is kind of one of the pioneers of drone light shows and doing them around the country. We've got the TW involved. And of course, we've got representatives from our principal partner, Leidos, including their chief executive, Paul Chase, and they're also their head of flight operations, Jesse Young. So basically, go to our website, buy a ticket and come along. Now, technically, the website is australianaviation.com.au/Australian-aviation-summit. You're never going to remember that. Just go on Google and put in Australian Aviation Summit. Come along, buy a ticket for the day, buy a ticket for the evening, for the awards in the evening. That's a really good networking opportunity. You will learn lots. And of course, you will get to meet Jake as well.
But that's not all. Call now and you will not only get tickets to the Aviation Summit, you'll get a free set of steak knives and a block of flats in Tasmania.
We can't guarantee that, but we don't know. Anyway, right, so plug over, come to our awards, come to our summit. We have had one of the biggest news stories of the year, which isn't the collapse of Carl's Jr., or whatever it's called. It is the collapse into administration of Rex. Now, this is something that a week ago, there's been murmurings of speculation, but it has sort of kind of come out of nowhere as quite a dramatic development.
It's kind of like what happened to Joe Biden, isn't it? There was, speculation and rumors that that he was going to, is he dropping out? Is he not dropping out? And then it just all happened at once.
Yes, in many ways, it's just like the US presidential election.
If you have one takeaway from this episode of the podcast, it's that Rex is exactly like Joe Biden.
Right, go on. Anyway, so we usually record this podcast on a Tuesday afternoon, so we've shifted to recording it on a Wednesday morning because we thought otherwise it's going to be out of date. Great move by us. So what is the latest? What do we know? So it was at 10 o'clock on Tuesday evening, Rex announced they're going into administration. What's kind of the current situation?
Current situation is that the domestic jet operations are going to be axed. Virgin is looking to take over at least 3 of those jets, which is, they've been desperate for more planes, given that their MAX order is delayed. So. And it's something of an ironic twist, given that Rex started its jet operations with jets that used to be flown by Virgin Australia. So it's sort of come full circle, though. I don't know if Virgin is taking back its own old jets, or if it's going to be looking for some of the newer 800s from Rex's fleet. Estimated 610 jobs to go. That's 360 in the domestic jet operations and 250 in regional. That said, regional is continuing for the time being. So those Saab flights, you can still book tickets on Rex Saab flights to regional destinations. Those, for the moment, are not going anywhere. The government has stepped in to make sure that those regional flights keep going. In terms of Rex's domestic passengers, Virgin last night, there was an agreement with Rex that Virgin would rebook Rex's passengers free of charge. Qantas and Jetstar have come out this morning saying that they're going to do the same thing. So there are echoes of Bonza in it, but one important thing is that Rex does have its own planes in the Saab fleet. You know, the main problem that Bonza had was that the lessor took back the planes, whereas Rex's main problem seems to be that it just ran out of money.
So we'll talk in a minute about the kind of wider problem. We've had 2 airlines go under. Can a third airline ever exist, etc., etc. But let's just rewind back for those that aren't aware. You've had Rex, which has for 20 years been running regional operations, mostly with its Saab 340s, and has made a pretty good fist of it. Kind of against all odds, managed to get through COVID in one piece. It did have some kind of limited supplemented flights from the government, but overall for 20 years, Rex has made a very good fist of being that third airline, being profitable, of proving all of the doubters wrong. So then kind of at the start of COVID, or midway through 2020, I think it was, Rex made this announcement that it would move into domestic jet operations, and they were quite open about why they picked their moment then, because at the time it was very cheap to lease 737s. You couldn't give them away.
And also, I think they were looking to supplant Virgin, as Virgin had gone into administration.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a kind of perfect storm, and perhaps shrewdly they took advantage. They managed to get a $150 million loan. Was it PAG? PAG. And they managed to get that quite quickly. I think they had their first 737 in the skies. I think it was March 2021, if memory serves me. They then obviously had the trouble that we thought COVID was over in Australia. It very much wasn't. We had another big set of lockdowns. But broadly, they seemed to get through that in one piece. But then what seems to have done it for them, and we don't know exactly what's gone wrong with exactly which part of the business, but it feels that this kind of post-COVID hangover is what's caused a lot of the trouble. Obviously, you had Virgin Australia come back, and actually come back bigger than we thought. I think they probably got 20, 30 more 737s than they initially intended coming out of administration. So they've emerged as a stronger rival. They've had a problem of struggling to get hold of pilots, who we've obviously had a lot of pilots leave the industry during COVID, but also those that remain get poached by the bigger carriers, or poached as you would kind of imagine. They've also had supply chain issues with their aircraft. So their Saab 340s are pretty old, and the older they get, the more they need to be repaired, they need to be serviced, etc. But getting hold of parts now is very difficult. And this perfect storm has caused them to stop a lot of their regional flights. Now, previously, we were hearing that they seem to be making a go of their 737 flights. But as John Sharp, the now chairman of Rex, said, one of the issues they had, like Bonza had, was getting the best slots in airports, which what that basically means, particularly at Sydney, is getting the best takeoff times, the times that people actually want to fly. So they had this kind of perfect storm of things that seem to have taken them down. What do we know much about what it is that's gone wrong? Because we know that the government stepped in to protect their regional flights, as you'd expect, because they're kind of an essential service. We know that now that pretty much their capital city flights are gone. Do we know what's caused? Is there one reason particularly that's caused this mess?
I don't know if there's one reason. Certainly a factor that probably played into it is in terms of getting 737s, it's a very, very different world now than it was in 2020. Because like you said, in 2020, 737s, you couldn't give them away. Rex picked them up for a song. But now the leases on 737s are way more expensive. 737s are harder to get. That's one of the reasons that Bonza came across, because it didn't have any planes and couldn't get any planes. So I think that the rise in the leasing costs for these 737s has also played at least a part in Rex going under. I think one of the major factors, though, Adam, is the Australian aviation curse. And I'm calling now, Adam, for a moratorium on praising airlines, or saying that something that they're doing is a good move, or maybe that that this is a savvy thing for them to be doing, or that they're doing a good job. Because every time we say that, Adam,
yes,
the airline goes bust.
But the problem with this, though, is it reflects badly on me, and it also reflects badly on you. It almost comes across as we don't have a clue what we're talking about, which worries me.
It's not that we don't have a clue what we're talking about.
Go
Adam.
on, save us, please.
It's a curse.
It's a curse.
It's a curse.
That's okay.
Some kind of wizard, possibly warlock, has placed a curse on us personally.
Yes. Oh, okay.
That airlines that we praise go under.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know yet if this wizard is in league with the dread Enoch.
I just don't know how this is going to seem on my CV when eventually I'm turfed out for hopelessly bringing down airlines. And when I'm in my next job interview, I can go, I'll stop you there. I know it looks bad, but the warlock.
There was a wizard. There was a wizard.
There was a wizard.
Adam. Yeah,
right.
It's like this was don't look too poorly on my record. Wizards were involved.
Okay, so when I'm going for my next job at not Carl's Jr., probably Macca's at this rate, I will play the warlock card, and there's probably a shortage of good burger flippers, so I might be okay.
Well, it'll be fine because McDonald's isn't an airline. Yet.
Okay, welcome back. So I took a break there to just stop the fantasy talk just for a second. We've now had 2 airlines go into administration in the space of 3 months, 4 months, something like that. We're now going to have a situation where we are back again to the duopoly of Sydney and Virgin Australia. I think there's a chance that Rex's regional flights will in the long term be okay, but we're basically back to only 2 airlines now flying capital city. The natural order has been restored. Now, it to me seems extraordinary that, this has been happening for the last 40 years, 50 years. We just cannot get any competition in Australia, genuine competition to go from 2 to 3, 4, 5 airlines. That really does point to, as many have said, an underlying problem with the industry. It can't always be the new players. Something's going wrong. What do you think the main reason is that yet again another challenge, another plucky underdog has been knocked out?
I think one of the big reasons is the duopoly is just so entrenched at the moment, and there's Qantas and Jetstar, this behemoth that is like sucking up all these flights and taking all. It's got the slots, it's got the planes, it's got the passengers, it's got the revenue, and then you've got Virgin Australia as well, in a respectable but kind of distant second. And it is hard for new players to break into the market, particularly considering Sydney-Melbourne is possibly the most lucrative air corridor in the world. Yeah. And you need to be flying out of Sydney if you want to make it. You need to be flying out of Sydney if you want to make a go of things. If you're trying to fly to capital cities, or even Bonza was desperate to get out into Sydney, and you need those slots at the prime times. And one of the main troubles is it's so difficult to get slots in Sydney, and it's so difficult to break the Qantas-Virgin duopoly. I mean, prices as well. If you look at when Rex announced its Melbourne to Perth flights, it had like sale prices for I think $99. Virgin immediately came in and undercut them. Like Qantas and Virgin, you have to say, are pretty kind of ruthless in trying to maintain their hold on the market.
Protect their patch, yeah. And the weird thing is you can't really blame, you certainly can't blame the CEOs of Qantas for having done a good job of building their company and defeating their competition. That is their job. They've done nothing wrong here. But at the same time, we talk about a duopoly. As far as I'm concerned, it is a monopoly, because if you get to 65, 70% of the market, depending on how you measure it, you're such a beast that nothing can take you down. You would never have a situation, you would never have a situation in the US where one domestic airline or one international airline gets to 70% of the market. At that point, you're almost unbeatable. So that's one issue. You've got this monstrous entity of the Qantas group. But then the other issue is that in this country, we simply do not have enough airports. So again, one of the reasons we're getting Western Sydney at our aviation summit is we would hope that Western Sydney is the first of many second airports in the capital city.
Aside from Avalon.
And no disrespect, of course, to our good friends at Avalon. Love your work at Avalon. But in terms of a major airport. And so the problem is, therefore, these airports, they're kind of slot constrained to one extent or another. Obviously, mostly at Sydney. But this makes it very, very hard for airlines to compete, because if the big airlines have the best takeoff times, have the best airports, it's very hard for anyone to come in. And so then you have to say long term, is there an argument for artificially breaking up Qantas? But that is one, would you come to that decision of doing it? Secondly, how legally viable would that be? And why? Also, it's very unfair on Qantas. They've done nothing wrong other than win, other than play their cards very, very well. But yeah, I kind of feel that unless we build more airports and unless we somehow attempt to break down Qantas, this is just going to keep happening, because it's been happening for years and years and years and years and years. You look at the old, I'm ranting now, I don't care, I'm keep going, right? We look at Virgin Australia when it last went into administration. So it's effectively a new company now. When it last went into administration in 2020, the last version of this, I think it was, off the top of my head, $7-8 billion that went down the drain. That's real people's money, real investment. So you can't say they didn't have a go. Virgin Australia, when they moved from Virgin Blue to Virgin Australia, was very gutsy in trying to become a full-service airline and take on Qantas. They lost a lot of money doing so. So you can't doubt their commitment to trying to make it work. You couldn't doubt Bonza's commitment to trying something new. Again, they had a lot of investment. They had a damn good go. So again, they've had a try. And obviously Rex as well spotted their gap in the market, spotted their opportunity in COVID, did everything right. And yet again, now in the space of of 10, 15, 20 years now, we're watching these competitors do everything right, but the cards are so stacked against them, they've just got no hope. That to me says that we need to take as a nation bold long-term action to free up this industry.
I think the most obvious solution for if the government was looking to break up Qantas, the most obvious solution would be to just tell it, right, you got to sell Jetstar, you got to take Jetstar out of the equation. You've got to compete against Jetstar now. You can't, lock up this full service in this low cost market at the same time. You're too big. That said, Qantas did originally stand for Queensland and Northern Territory Aerial Services. So we could perhaps see Queensland Aerial Services and Northern Territory Aerial Services if they wanted to really throw a spanner. Maybe like a Qus and Ntus.
So yeah, so you'd have, wouldn't the Q be on its own? Queensland
Aerial Services and Northern Territory Aerial Services.
So who's taking the and?
Well, nobody's taking the and. There's no and.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yes.
But so that's if the government, I don't think the government will. No, but if the government was looking to break up Qantas, I think telling it to divest Jetstar would be the most obvious move.
And the problem is that on paper that sounds fine. Oh, okay, just chop them up into two. But the truth is that Jetstar's operation is completely intertwined with Qantas's. Like a lot of sort of head office staff, they work for the Qantas group. It's not all perfectly. You can't just chop it in half. So then you'd have the question of, if you somehow were to disentangle this, first, I don't even know if that's legal. I mean, you can't just go and, just chop up a company. And secondly, if they were to somehow rip it apart, how profitable would Jetstar be without the support of the mothership? So the Qantas group, if you try to do that, would say, well, actually, if you take this away, it wouldn't work. Look at Tiger. They weren't able to make it work without the mothership of Qantas. So that's the issue there.
Well, Tiger later got under the mothership of Virgin.
Yes, of course. But you didn't have a bigger wizard mothership. I don't know. You know what I'm going.
Yeah. To your earlier point as well, Adam, about services. I think one factor that we saw with both Bonza and Rex is that people actually really liked those domestic services that Bonza and Rex were doing.
Yes, that's true.
People, there was glowing praise for Rex's in-flight services, for Bonza's in-flight services. We saw Bonza and Rex topping reliability charts for their domestic. Rex has been saying for months their domestic jet operations, carve the domestic jet operations out, look at them in isolation. They were the most reliable domestic airline in the country. So these airlines have been doing really good services, but it's been difficult for them to make money because the duopoly is so probably because the duopoly is so entrenched. And actually, I do want to remark on the fact that Rex is arguably the successor to Ansett, because Rex was born out of Hazelton and Kendall Airlines, and on its own website it says it arose from the ashes of Ansett. So when Hazelton and Kendall merged, they became Rex. Rex and Bonza, they did great services, but it was remarked of Ansett back in the day that it was a great airline, but a terrible business.
Yeah, and that's a very good point you make, because I've seen a lot of the comments on our website, on social media, also kind of broadly on newspaper websites as well. And there was one comment from somebody who flew Rex's capital city flights, and he said, I was flying Qantas for years and years and years. I've made the leap to fly with Rex, and apart from the fact I saved me money, it was more reliable. Why was it more reliable? Because if you have a limited fleet, your flight may be delayed, but it's very unlikely to be cancelled, because at some point that thing has to go. The bus has to leave. Their business model collapses if the thing doesn't take off. So when you were flying those Rex flights, you had an almost guarantee that it's going to work. The other thing as well is Rex being a slightly smaller airline, it did very much have a family business feel, and it's a bit of an exaggeration to say that everybody knew everybody, but there was an element of that there. There was an element that when you have a smaller team, when they all kind of believe in the company and the mission a little bit more, you get better customer service. This is something that no amount of...
And you saw it with Bonza.
Exactly the same thing.
The reports from Bonza is that the staff of Bonza really believed in the airline, believed in what the airline was doing, and had a good time.
Yeah.
And really cared about the customers.
Everybody I know that flew Bonza, first hand told me they had a fantastic experience at every stage. Everyone was lovely. When I've flown Rex's 737 operation, I think it was once or twice I flew. Both of those were two of the best domestic flights I've had in Australia. My personal experience, everyone just cared that little bit more. There's no policy that makes staff care as much as a culture that they have built. So that's the crying shame here. You're actually losing something really good.
And I was supposed to fly on Rex in October. I had a flight booked with Rex down to Melbourne, and it makes me sad that I'm not going to get to experience. It made me sad that I wasn't going to get to experience Bonza when Bonza went under. I've contacted Virgin to rebook, and Virgin's fine. I like Virgin. I mainly fly with Virgin when I fly, but it does sort of make me sad that I'm not going to get the Rex experience, if you will. It is a crying shame, and I think that it's a loss of a product in the market. It's not just about the airfares; it's about the product. And it's a shame that product is gone now, and that we again are back to a situation where we have fewer choices. We have less variety in the market. If you want to fly from Sydney to Melbourne, Qantas, Jetstar, or Virgin. That's it. So
at the moment, the government is, I would hope, putting the finishing touches to its aviation white paper. So for those of you unaware of the anarchic, the old-fashioned world of British parliamentary systems, which is where this ultimately comes from. We had archaic, yes.
Yeah, anarchic means lawless, which may also be true.
Yes, true. Archaic. So basically, what they did, the government, which was I think quite good. The new, I say new now, quite old, Labour federal government basically said that the Libs weren't making anywhere near enough effort with aviation, and that they needed to have a long-term plan to take us to 2050 and beyond.
And Catherine King has said, there was a question, the opposition has criticised you for this and this, and Catherine King came out and very forcefully said, I'm not taking this from the opposition. They did nothing.
Yeah, exactly. So their argument, I don't want to get into politics, but their argument was the previous government gave up on governing, and that we need to have some kind of long-term plan. So we had an aviation green paper, which was kind of like the government's initial thoughts to how we should, the things we need to consider, and their initial thoughts of how we should progress. And then the green paper leads to industry consultation. So that's lots and lots of submissions, and people can kind of come to them with their views, and they take all of this and they come up with a long-term plan to 2050. Now, God willing, this white paper is going to be published in the next 6 weeks or so. But surely now, if I were working on this white paper, I would say, well, we've had 2 airlines now go under in the space of a few months. We need to have a long-term plan to how we support new entrants. And clearly the shake-up of slot rules or proposed shake-up of slot rules at Sydney Airport will make a difference. But that alone is not enough. There needs to be a plan to allow these new entrants to have a chance. There surely also needs to be a plan as a nation to encourage companies both within Australia and from outside Australia to invest in this market. You need to make a situation where these things have a chance of succeeding, because clearly there is a lot of money in aviation. There is a lot of people that can do budget airlines very well globally. You know, we had Virgin move into Australian Virgin Blue, and obviously that starts from Virgin Atlantic, from the Branson Empire. But there's nothing stopping, in theory, another a smaller operator saying, well, we fancy a chance in Australia. The government need to do something to sort out those problems and encourage investment. I personally think you look at it, people say Australia has quite a small population. Not so much anymore. Not so much anymore. It's a growing population.
One of the problems, though, is that it's very spread out.
Yes, exactly. That is true. You've got this thing that you've got a population of whatever it is, 25 million now. In reality, only half of them are living in the 3 big major cities or near them. So yes, it's spread out. But I still think this is nonsense. I still see no reason why you can't have 3 or 4 domestic operators that are all actually of a reasonable size and having a go and have relatively the same market share. But that's where we need to get to at some point, because competition is good for prices and is good for customer service.
And some people might say, well, what about high-speed rail? But we're not going to talk about that on this podcast.
Not on this show, no.
But, on the topic of government and Rex specifically, the government has sort of indicated that it wants more of a, like Catherine King has said, we want more of a say in what's going to happen in Rex's future, because Rex is basically an essential service for a lot of these airports that it connects to. If you're flying regional, there's a handful of operators. You got Sharp Airlines, which, by the way, took a very backhanded swipe at Rex the other day, saying the government should support Rex, but only on routes where it wasn't competing with anyone else. Sharp Airlines did not like Rex, but you've got a handful of smaller operators. You've got Skytrans, you've got Fly Pelican, you've got Nexus Airlines, this new startup over in the West. You've got Link Airways. You've got all these handful of smaller operators. And they're basically essential services, but Rex was sort of the king of the hill there. And Catherine King was saying, getting back to what I was saying, Catherine King was saying that the government wants more of a say in what's going to happen with Rex. And there have been calls, the TWU have said the government should take a stake in Rex to be able to sort of guarantee more its future and guarantee the services, these regional services. Adam Bant from the Greens went further. He said that the government should nationalise Rex. The government itself should be operating Rex to make sure that these services happen. Like a public train or a public bus, right? So in terms of what the future of Rex itself is, there is some sort of, speculation swirling around. I mean, will the government take a stake in Rex to, kind of cement more of a say in what's going on and try to guarantee that these services continue? Will Virgin have a look and through its owners, Bain Capital, who have deep pockets? We were discussing this, last night when the news broke at him. Virgin could Virgin have a look at taking over Rex? Because if Virgin buys Rex, then that's a regional network, built up with planes ready to go right off the bat.
So the problem with that, and that does make sense. There is an argument for that. The problem is if they do that, then they end up slowly going back to the Virgin that they were before. And their strategy is to have an all 737 fleet. So there is, again, pros and cons. They could look at it and go, this is profitable.
They have VARA. They have Virgin Australia Regional Airlines, which is over in the West and hasn't really broken in on the East. And that sort of flies mainly like regional jets. They've got the Fokkers. They've got, I think, a couple of A320s left over from Tiger Airways. But they're doing mainly mainly stuff over in the West and I think over in South Australia. They're not really over on the East Coast. If Virgin takes over Rex, then suddenly Virgin Australia Regional Airlines could have a big presence on the East Coast. Snapping up Rex's entire network in one fell swoop. It also, Rex has that majority stake in National Jet Express. And, if Virgin takes over Rex and gets that stake in National Jet Express, suddenly it's got a bunch of E190s and Dash 8s as well. So that's a prospect for Virgin. Will they go for it? I don't know. There have been rumors as well. I think the Oz are speculating that PAG, that Asian lender that stumped up the money for these 737s in the first place, may be looking to buy Rex out. It's all what's going to happen with Rex is very, very early days.
Now the interesting thing that we may or may not, depending on the administration here in the next week or so, is that friend of the show John Sharp, who was deputy chairman, now chairman, but has effectively been running the operation, or has been the kind of the figurehead for this. Former transport minister, I believe, back in the day.
Under the Howard government.
Yeah, under the Howard government. Not a man to pull any punches or mince his words. Certainly somebody that's very outgoing and going and speaking to the media, etc. He will know more than anybody what has or hasn't gone wrong. I can't imagine we're going to keep him quiet for too long. So very soon we're going to hear the Rex side of the story.
There was, the main story about Rex recently has been this attempted boardroom coup by Lim Kim Hai, the former executive chairman. What's he looking to do?
Yes. So we're going to hear. We've heard all this speculation. There's two sides to every story. We haven't heard the Rex side of the story. We're almost certainly going to hear that very soon. So it's going to be very interesting, particularly given that I think we talked about this last week. Rex launched a kind of not a major, but a fairly significant new advertising campaign. They had a creative agency or whatever in there to do this. So they thought certain elements of business were working, clearly.
Yeah, and I think I don't think that Rex was doing a lot of marketing for its domestic jet operations before this. They were putting out press releases and something, but I didn't recall seeing any Rex ad campaigns before this one, which they launched last week. A little too late, one might argue.
Yeah. So, well, anyway, that's I think we'll wrap up the Rexit talk, which you used in a different capacity, but it does work actually quite well on this one as well. We'll call this Rexit.
I'm Rex Orsted.
Oh, God. Right, we're going to go for a break. Okay, welcome back. So, as you would imagine, Rexit has kind of swallowed up most of our attention here at Australian Aviation.
We had Bonza-geddon.
Bonza-geddon, yeah.
Yeah, we need a catchy name for what's happened with Rex, because I think Rexit was in a different context.
With Rexit, Rex Orsted, if you do have any ideas.
Rexpiration.
Yeah, maybe they hit their Rexpiration dates.
Yeah, maybe. We'll workshop this.
We'll workshop this. Yes, our team of 15-year-old interns will be flogged a little harder in order to come up with another witty headline. Right. So as I say, you would imagine, Rex has taken up almost every other story we've written in the last week, but there have been some other sort of significant stories. The one I want to pick out first, and we are kind of running shortish on time, is Air New Zealand, who they have kind of pushed back their kind of net zero targets. And this is very significant because Air New Zealand was in an awful lot of trouble during COVID, as a lot of airlines were. And effectively, the government under Jacinda Ardern came in to bail them out. And one of the terms of their bailout, or the terms of their rescue, was that they would make a lot more effort to care about the environment and have a lot more of a plan. It feels this has slid back a little bit. Jake, tell us a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so the Air New Zealand has dropped its 2030 sustainability target, and it's pulling out of the Science Based Targets Initiative. Basically, what it said is, we've made a good go of it, but it's too hard. They're saying that many of the levers or levers it needs to hit that target. So getting new, more efficient aircraft. We know that the Dreamliners have sort of been delayed. The new Dreamliners. Availability and affordability of alternative fuels, regulatory and policy support. It says we can't control those, and unless we sort of have more certainty on those, then the targets are not looking likely. Greg Foran, the CEO, said, quote, In recent months and more so in the last few weeks, it's also become apparent that potential delays to the fleet renewal plan pose an additional risk to the target's achievability. It is possible that the airline may need to retain its existing fleet for longer than planned due to global manufacturing and supply chain issues that could potentially slow the introduction of newer, more fuel-efficient aircraft into the fleet. And that may also be, referring to, I think, Air New Zealand was looking to get some the 320 Neos or something like that as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, Adam.
I think that's right. So effectively what they're saying, and it does make sense, is that they were never to have foreseen the kind of the post-COVID issues, which we mentioned earlier in the show that we're all living with. One of it is it's hard to get hold of new aircraft. And for those of you that are unaware, the kind of the next generation of aircraft, which are kind of the current generation in a lot of other places in the world, they are based on their fuselage and material. It's all newfangled. I will bodge for science. But basically, it's lighter and stronger. And what that means is the aircraft can either fly further or they're a lot more fuel efficient. And so in terms of hitting this...
And the engines are more fuel efficient as well, generally.
Yes, exactly. Yes, what I meant to say. They're more fuel efficient. So what this basically means is that if you're going to hit your net 50, 2050 target, your initial step is to use this next generation of aircraft because that instantly makes you about 20% better. And then the step after that is sustainable aviation fuels. And then again, the step after that is perhaps the generation of aircraft afterwards. But what they're basically saying is fronting up and saying, this isn't going to be possible. Right now, these post-COVID problems are going to make things more difficult. Now, the argument is, are they just like, per saying hands up, it's too difficult, or is this going to be something we're going to see all around the industry? Because they're one of the first airlines to come out publicly and say with 2030 targets not going to happen. Is this simply the inevitable path to unwinding their promises everywhere?
Well, Dame Therese Walsh, who was the chair of Air New Zealand, has said that Air New Zealand is still committed to hitting its 2050 net zero target. She said that the airline is still working to transition away from fossil fuels, advocating for, better regulatory and policy settings to help mitigate climate change risk. The airline is, it's bought, these 9 million litres of sustainable aviation fuel, back in April. It partnered last year with the New Zealand government to invest more than $2 million into domestic SAF production in New Zealand. It's also having a look at electric aviation. It's picked out this Alia electric aircraft from Beta Technologies to, test these cargo services with New Zealand Post, flying from Wellington to Marlborough Airport. So I don't think Air New Zealand is abandoning sustainability entirely. I just think this is kind of a setback.
It's a setback. No, it does make complete sense. Right, let's move on to some more news of the week. I think we spoke about this on the last episode, which was that Virgin had axed its Cairns to Tokyo route. And effectively, we have found out perhaps more information on why, which is that it was one of the worst performers. But actually, the load factors, which is industry mumbo jumbo for the kind of percentage of seats you've filled, were absolutely horrendous. So tell us a little bit more about this, Jake.
Yeah, so... Tokyo, so Cairns to Haneda was, which was being operated by the MAX 8s, was the second, back in April, according to this official BITRA data, the second lowest performing international service that the Cairns had. So flights inbound was 65.2% full. Outbound 49.6% full. So they were less than half full going outbound on average. This is well below the average international load factors for Virgin. The only lower one in April was to Apia in Samoa. Now that was outbound 44.5%, inbound 39.3%. But these Apia services are seasonal. So, they're getting more customers to Samoa over the end of year peak, which is kind of sustaining the helping, I guess, sustain the route through the rest of the year. If you're interested, by the way, the strongest performing route for Virgin in April was Brisbane to Port Vila, and this was before the collapse of Air Vanuatu. So you'd have to think that that route is doing even better now. Air Vanuatu, by the way, may be resuming domestic operations soon, according to the liquidators. Just slipping that in. The depth of coverage there. So it was it was not doing as well as Virgin had hoped, and Virgin has again sort of cited, the inbound factors, the inbound load factors were not as great as Virgin was hoping. There's a really high Australian dollar relative to the yen, which means it's expensive for Japanese travelers who Virgin was looking for to fill these planes to be flying into Australia and, spending money here because, the yen is worth so much less.
Okay, and it's actually another example of how hard aviation is and how hard it is. You can have all the number crunches and do all the predictions you want. Unless you put a route on, you will not know whether it is going to work, and you are at the mercy of global events.
And these MAX 8s are being reassigned from the Cairns route into domestic operations.
So it does make sense. And I would say with Virgin, they were very transparent and honest about this. They said, look, it's just not working, and we will cancel your flights, we will give you your money back. We have got other options if you want to get there. But it kind of is what it is. And I thought the way they handled that was very good. But that's just the nature of the beast of working in aviation.
And one sort of upside for Virgin is it does get those planes off the Cairns route and into domestic.
Yes.
And Virgin, as seen by the fact that it's jumped on these Rex planes, is really looking for more planes on domestic.
Right. I think we've got time for one more story, and only one more because you will try and slip in another one. I know what you like, but only one more story. But let's end on some good news. So this is a story from Jake's favourite place in the world. If heaven were a place on earth, heaven would be the Gold Coast. Jake, tell us more good news about your favourite place, the Gold Coast.
Yeah, heaven, a place on earth, and ooh, baby, do you know what that's worth? This is a story out of Gold Coast Airport, which has seen its best financial year on record for domestic traffic. So 2023-2024, there were 5.6 million domestic travellers, which is up more than 210,000 on the previous high watermark. This came as well as 706,000 international travellers. Sydney and Melbourne were among the 5 busiest routes in the country. That's Sydney and Melbourne to the Gold Coast. And what was interesting is that this came kind of despite the collapse of Bonza, because Bonza had selected Gold Coast as its third base. And was trying to station 2 planes there. The Gold Coast Airport's figures basically showed even without Bonza, it would still have been the airport's biggest ever domestic year. There was just I think 2% of overall passengers out of the Gold Coast were Bonza passengers. And a spokesperson said obviously we're disappointed to have lost Bonza for the network. They did contribute. But they were only a very, very small sliver of the overall passenger mix. The spokesperson said, quoting here, despite this, the airline played an important role in Australia's aviation industry, and as an airport operator, we strongly believe in the importance of increased airline competition in Australia to make air travel more accessible and affordable. And this is, going back, I guess, full circle to we do need more airlines, despite the fact that it is so hard to get them going around here.
Good news in the end. I think that is probably just about all we've got time for. If you want to do something with yourself now, go on Google, tap in Australian Aviation Summit, and go and get yourself a ticket. We will be back on this show next time. Next
we will
week.
Be back on this show the next time.
At some point we'll turn up.
Unless we're both fired to avert
which
the
is 50-50 given the curse.
But Adam, there is just one more thing.
Oh, here we go. It doesn't, because what annoys me is when I open it up for you to do this, you're like, I don't know what's going on. I just end the show. It's pathetic. Whatever I do, I can't. Go on. What is it?
I would like to apologise.
Can we cut this, Jordan? Can we cut this out? I want to have this. Say that again.
I would like to apologise
to me,
to sporting fans.
Okay.
For the heresy that I committed last week.
What did you say? In
shortening rugby league to rugby. Because apparently you can only do that for rugby union.
Right.
So rugby union is just rugby. Rugby league has to be shortened to league, I believe. So my apologies to all the rugby and rugby league fans out there for a story that I put up talking about this special Air New Zealand flight, talking of Air New Zealand to Las Vegas, which overshadowed the fact that the flight sold out in minutes, which I thought was quite an achievement.
A shameful moment for you in your career. You have brought utter disgrace on us. There will be a meeting to discuss your future. Decent league fans.
I will say.
Go on.
Yeah, I will say it was refreshing to get criticism that wasn't about aviation for once. But,
we don't even dream of not getting criticism. That is simply a heaven we'll never reach. But just simply different criticism.
Just a variety in the criticism.
A variety of criticism.
So well done to Air New Zealand for selling out this rugby league flight, and best of luck to all the fans who'll be going over to Las Vegas to see the Warriors play.
Right, so it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from my disgraced co-host Jake Nelson. Say goodbye.
I am going into the shame cube.
You are.
Adam.
You are shamed. Boo. Boo.
I think we've washed out the shame cube from last time.
Yes. Anyway, we'll be back at the same time next week. But from now, from me and Jake, goodbye.
Goodbye.